For 10 years, the whole family had shunned Aunt Jean, calling her crazy. On her birthday, I was the only one who brought her a bowl of hot tomato soup. The old woman suddenly stopped smiling and said quietly, "You're kind, like your mother, but you need to know this. Tonight, your husband will ask for a divorce, but don't you agree? Do exactly as I say." Hello everyone. Let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. Enjoy the story. P. But before those words were spoken, that morning had seemed perfectly ordinary to Clara, just as quiet and a little dusty as the thousands of mornings before it. In her small workshop, set up in the basement of a 5-story apartment building, it smelled of pine resin, turpentine, and time itself. It was quiet here. The noise of the autumn wind sweeping through the streets of Stone Creek didn't reach this far down. Clara sat hunched over her workbench. The yellow light of an old desk lamp pulled her hands from the gloom thin but strong fingers, stained with traces of gold leaf and adhesive. Before her lay the fragments of a 19th-century saucer, the finest Meissen porcelain. Someone had broken it carelessly, sweeping it off a table, but Clara knew that anything could be fixed if you had patience. If you didn't breathe too loudly, she picked up a tiny fragment with tweezers, coated the edge with a special compound, and pressed it to the main piece. 1, 2, 3. You had to hold it for a long time. In this silence, she felt calm. Here, she wasn't the wife of Robert, the city official. She wasn't poor Clara, pitied by her older sister. Here, she was a master restorer. Here, things were given a second life. There you are again, fiddling with your broken china. Her husband's voice still seemed to ring in her ears, though Robert had left for work 3 hours ago. He'd said it with that condescending smirk, adjusting his tie in the mirror. A hobby, he called it. A sweet little pastime. He never asked how many nights she had spent studying the chemical composition of antique glazes. To him, it was just dirt. Clara sighed and set down the tweezers. Her back ached. She was 45, and sometimes she felt every one of those years in her joints. Her sister, Liz, was no better. She had stopped by yesterday, glanced around the workshop with her lips pursed in disgust, and said, "Clara, maybe it's time to stop breathing these fumes. Robert makes a good living. You could just stay home, cook, take care of yourself. Look at your hands." Clara had said nothing. She was used to being silent. It was easier to nod, hide her hands in the pockets of her apron, and agree than to explain that these broken pieces were the only real thing in her life, the only thing that didn't betray her. The clock on the wall chimed a hollow 2 o'clock. Time to go. Clara took off her work coat and hung it carefully on a nail. She pulled a thermos from her bag. Inside was hot tomato soup, thick and rich, just the way her mom used to make it. Today, she was going to see Aunt Jean. Outside, it was damp. Autumn had come early and angry this year. The wind tore the last leaves from the trees, and they stuck to the pavement in wet patches. Clara pulled her coat tighter. The family had long since written Jean off the list of the living. "She's crazy," Robert would say, circling his finger at his temple. "She's dangerous. She spouts nonsense about ghosts and hidden treasures," Liz would echo. They had stopped visiting her 10 years ago. But Clara remembered something else. She remembered warm hands, the smell of dried apples, and the stories Jean used to tell her as a child. She couldn't abandon the old woman. She just couldn't. The hallway of the building where her aunt lived smelled of dampness and cat food. Clara walked up to the 3rd floor and opened the door with her own key. "Aunt Jean, it's me, Clara. I brought soup." The apartment was dark, the curtains drawn. Jeanette Peterson sat in her old armchair, wrapped in a downy shawl. She seemed tiny, shrunken like an autumn leaf. "Clarabelle," she rasped. Clara went to the kitchen, found a clean bowl, and poured the steaming soup. The scent of garlic and comfort filled the air. She placed the bowl on a small table in front of the armchair. "Eat it while it's hot. There's fresh sour cream." Jeanette looked up. Her gaze was clear, frighteningly sharp for someone everyone considered insane. She wasn't looking at the soup. She was looking straight into Clara's soul. Suddenly, her dry, veiny hand shot out and grabbed Clara's wrist. The grip was like iron. Clara flinched, nearly dropping the spoon. "Aunt Jean, Are you in pain? Be quiet. The old woman's voice was strong now. It wasn't the whisper of a sick woman. It was a command. Listen to me, girl. There isn't much time. Clara froze. For some reason, her heart began to pound. You're kind, Clara. Too kind. Just like your mother was. She pitied everyone, too, right up until she burned out. But that's not what this is about. Jeanette pulled her closer, forcing her to lean down. Tonight, she hissed, her eyes wild but honest. Your Robert will come home and ask for a divorce. Clara tried to pull her hand away, laughing nervously. Aunt Jean, what are you talking about? We're fine. Robert just works a lot. He gets tired. Don't you dare, Jeanette interrupted. Don't you dare lie to yourself. I know. I see things. He's already made up his mind. He wants to take everything and throw you out like a stray kitten. A coldness washed over Clara. A sticky, irrational fear crept up her spine. How could she know? She never leaves the house. Listen to me carefully, Jean continued, her grip tightening. Your mother didn't just die young for no reason. She left something. For you, not for Liz, not for that vampire you married, but for you. Left what? Mom didn't have anything. In the old house, Jean switched to a whisper, glancing at the dark corners of the room as if someone were standing there. In the kitchen, behind the hearth, there's a tile with a bluebell on it, third from the bottom. It's loose. You have to go there. Don't sign a single paper. Do you hear me? Not one. Not until you get what's hidden there. Jeanette finally released her fingers. Red marks remained on Clara's wrist. The old woman leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and breathed heavily, as if the conversation had drained her of her last ounce of strength. Go, she exhaled. Go, before he gets back. And remember the tile. Clara left the building with her legs feeling like jelly. The cold air hit her face but didn't cool the flush in her cheeks. Nonsense, she thought, walking quickly down the street. An old woman's ravings. Robert loves me. Well, in his own way. We've been together for 20 years. A divorce? But the closer she got to her own home, the heavier her heart became. Her aunt's words were like a shard of glass lodged in her mind, scratching and scratching. She opened the door to her apartment. It was quiet. Too quiet. Robert was supposed to be at a meeting at City Hall. Clara took off her coat and walked down the hall. She wanted to make some tea, calm down, forget that strange look in Aunt Jean's eyes. She passed the guest room. The door, usually shut tight, was slightly ajar. Clara stopped. Some sixth sense made her push it open. The room was empty, the bed perfectly made, but on the floor by the window stood a suitcase. It was Robert's favorite leather suitcase. Expensive. Italian. He always kept it on the top shelf of the hall closet behind the winter gear, only taking it out for long business trips. But Robert hadn't mentioned any trip. He'd said things were quiet at work. Clara moved closer, feeling the floor give way beneath her. The suitcase wasn't empty. It was heavy, packed with clothes. Next to it, on a chair, lay a stack of his shirts, folded neatly the way only he folded them when he didn't want anyone else touching his things. In the silence of the apartment, Clara heard a key turn in the front door. Click! Robert was back. Clara froze, listening to the sound of his footsteps in the entryway. They were heavy, confident, the walk of a man who knows this house belongs to him. She quickly left the guest room, pulling the door closed behind her, and headed for the kitchen. Her heart was hammering in her throat, making it hard to breathe. You're home? Robert's voice was even, emotionless. Yes, she answered, trying to keep her own voice from trembling. I just got back. Do you want dinner? I can heat something up. He walked into the kitchen without taking off his suit jacket. In his hands was a slim leather portfolio. He placed it on the table, right on top of the lace tablecloth she had embroidered last summer. No, he said, not looking at her. Sit down, Clara. We need to talk. A tension hung in the air, thick and heavy like the calm before a storm. Clara sank onto a chair, feeling her fingers go cold. She knew this tone. Robert used it when he was reprimanding his subordinates or explaining to her why she shouldn't buy new tools. He sat across from her, lacing his fingers together. I've been thinking for a long time, he began, looking somewhere past her face, at the wall behind her, and I've come to the conclusion that this can't go on. We're different people. My career is taking off. I need to maintain a certain standard. I need a wife who will help me, be by my side at receptions, network with the right people. And you? He paused, as if searching for a softer word, but chose the most hurtful one. You live in your own world of broken china and old rags. You're becoming eccentric, Clara. People are starting to notice. Clara was silent. The blood drained from her face. She looked at his hands, well manicured, with an expensive watch on his wrist. These hands had once held her. These hands she had treated with ointment when he burned himself at the lake house. I've prepared the documents. He pushed the portfolio toward her. This is a marital settlement agreement. It's all fair. I'm leaving you the apartment, but on the condition, of course, that you sign over the lake house and the garage to me and waive any claim on my financial accounts. It's for your own good. You don't know how to handle money, and I can ensure you a decent living. A divorce? The word escaped her in a hoarse whisper. Robert, but it's been 20 years. 20 years, he nodded, a flash of irritation in his eyes. Exactly. For 20 years, I've been pulling this weight. It's enough. Sign it, Clara. Don't make this difficult. She hid her trembling hands under the table, gripping her knees so tightly her knuckles turned white. One thought pounded in her head. Aunt Jean was right. Every single word the crazy old woman said was coming true. The doorbell rang, sharp and demanding. Robert didn't even seem surprised. He stood up and went to open it, as if he were expecting guests. Clara sat, unable to move. Liz walked into the entryway. Her older sister. She was wearing her best coat, her hair perfectly styled, smelling of the expensive perfume that had always seemed too sharp to Clara. Well, did you two talk? She asked from the doorway, pulling off her gloves. Clara looked up at her, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Liz had always been strict, but she was her sister. She was supposed to defend her. She was supposed to tell Robert he was out of his mind. But Liz walked into the kitchen without looking at Clara and stood next to Robert, as if they were a team. Clara, don't just sit there like a statue, she said in a businesslike tone. Robert is right. I've been telling you for a long time. You need help. You've completely let yourself go. This workshop of yours. The smell of glue. You realize this isn't normal. Right? Liz. Clara didn't recognize her sister. What are you talking about? What help? Liz sighed, rolling her eyes dramatically. Genetics, sweetie. Aunt Jean started by collecting junk, too. Do you want to end up like her? In a mental institution? Robert is offering you a way out. He's willing to pay for a good clinic, then rent a small apartment for you somewhere in a quiet neighborhood. You'll be looked after. Clara's gaze shifted from her husband to her sister. They stood there, towering over her like judges, and in their eyes there wasn't a shred of sympathy, only cold calculation. You planned this together, she whispered. Liz, you knew? I'm looking out for you, her sister snapped, a hysterical note creeping into her voice. You're incapable of living on your own. You're like a child. Who's going to pay the rent? Who's going to buy groceries? Robert is a saint for putting up with your quirks for so many years, and now he has a chance at a normal life. And so do you. Liz went to the closet in the hall and pulled out a large duffel bag. I'll help you pack, she said, tossing the bag on the floor. Just the essentials. Robert will bring the rest later, or throw it out. It's all junk anyway. Clara watched as her sister opened the closet, her hands, heavy with rings, sorting through the hangers. She saw Liz set aside her favorite wool dress, muttering, "This old thing? It's trash." Inside Clara, something broke. It was as if the thin porcelain thread that held her faith in family had snapped with a quiet ping. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly. Robert and Liz exchanged a look. Robert smirked, but his eyes remained cold. Clara! Don't make a scene, he said wearily. You know I have connections. If you don't sign this willingly, I'll have you declared legally incompetent. I already have notes from a doctor, your conversations with objects, your reclusiveness. Any judge will believe you're sick, just like your aunt. He opened the portfolio, took out a pen heavy, expensive, with a gold nib and placed it on top of the papers. Liz walked to the table, pushed the chair Clara was sitting on closer to the documents. She placed a hand on her shoulder. The gesture, meant to look supportive, felt as heavy as a gravestone. She leaned close to her sister's ear and hissed, "Clara, just sign it. Robert says you're clearly not in a state to manage money. Don't embarrass us. Do it now, and we'll handle everything quietly." Clara stared at the white sheet of paper. The letters blurred before her eyes. Settlement agreement. Waiver of marital property rights. The pen lay beside it, gleaming in the kitchen light like a small dagger. To sign, to surrender, to disappear, to become poor Clara who lives on her ex-husband's allowance and takes her medication on schedule. It would be so easy, but suddenly, Aunt Jean's voice echoed in her ears. "Don't sign a single paper until you find the tile." Clara slowly raised her hand. Her fingers were trembling, but she forced them into a fist. She didn't pick up the pen. She pushed it aside. "No," she said, louder now, looking her sister straight in the eye. Liz flinched as if she'd been slapped. "What did you say?" "I said no. I'm not signing anything. And I'm not going anywhere." Robert slammed his hand on the table. The cups in the china cabinet rattled pitifully. "You'll regret this, Clara," he seethed through his teeth. "You will regret this very much." "Maybe," she answered, standing up. Her legs were shaky, but she was on her feet. But not today. She turned and walked toward the exit. Not to the bedroom, not to the bathroom. She walked to the front door. She had to get out of there, get to the place that smelled of resin, where things didn't lie to her workshop. Behind her, she heard Liz's angry hiss. "Fool! What a fool you are!" But Clara wasn't listening anymore. She grabbed her coat from the rack and ran out into the hallway, hearing the door to her old life slam shut behind her with a deafening crash. Clara ran into the basement, breathing heavily, and locked the heavy metal door behind her with 2 turns of the key. Click. Click. Only here, underground, could she catch her breath. The workshop greeted her with its familiar smell of turpentine and dust, but today the scent wasn't comforting. It felt stale, like a tomb. Clara slid down the wall to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees. In the darkness, the shelves of unfinished projects stood out like pale ghosts. A shepherdess figurine without a head, a vase glued together from a dozen shards, a cracked sugar bowl. They were all broken, just like her. Maybe Liz is right. A treacherous voice whispered in her head. Maybe I really am just like these things. Unwanted, defective. She remembered Robert's face. Cold, alien. She remembered how her sister had matter-of-factly packed her dresses into trash bags, how easily they had erased her from their lives, as if wiping a stain from a tablecloth. The tears she had held back upstairs finally broke through. Clara cried silently, her face buried in her knees, her shoulders shaking with sobs. She was ashamed for letting them treat her this way, ashamed for believing them. The night dragged on. Clara didn't turn on the light. She lay on the narrow cot in the corner, covered with an old blanket, listening to the sound of water dripping somewhere. Drip, drip, drip. By morning, the tears had dried, leaving an emptiness inside. She stared at the ceiling, at the gray patches of dampness. I have to leave, she thought. Just pack a few things and go to the state capital, or even farther. To a place where no one knew Clara, the failure, the abandoned wife. Find a job, rent a room, forget this town, these faces, this shame. She imagined the neighbors whispering by the entrance. Did you hear? Clara finally lost her mind. Her husband tried to put her in an asylum, but she ran away. The thought made her physically ill. There was a knock on the door. Clara started. Who is it? Robert? The police? Orderlies? She froze, holding her breath. The knock came again, confident but not aggressive. Miss Peterson? A man's voice called out, an unfamiliar voice. Are you in there? She slowly got up and walked to the door. Who is it? My name is Arthur Kingsley. I'm here on behalf of your aunt, Jeanette Peterson. Clara frowned. Aunt Jean? Since when did she have male acquaintances? She never spoke to anyone. She opened the door a crack, leaving the chain lock on. In the hallway stood an elderly man in a worn gray coat and an old-fashioned hat. He held an equally old, well-traveled briefcase. His face was tired and wrinkled, but his eyes were sharp and kind. Jeanette called me last night, he said, noticing her wary expression. For the first time in 15 years. She said you needed help. May I come in? It's drafty out here. Clara hesitated for a second, then unhooked the chain. She had nothing left to lose. If this was another one of Robert's tricks, so be it. Arthur came in, removed his hat, and looked around. A fine workshop, he said, nodding toward the shelves. Quiet. Your mother also loved quiet. Clara froze. You knew my mother? I was her student. He smiled with the corners of his eyes. Many years ago, she taught art history. Remember? I was just a poor law student back then, always hungry. She'd feed me sandwiches and teach me to understand people the way she understood porcelain to see the cracks before the piece shatters. He walked to the workbench, placed his briefcase on it, and took out a thermos. Herbal tea, he explained. You need to warm up. You're very pale, Miss Peterson. Clara took the plastic cup he offered. Warmth spread through her fingers. Why are you here? She asked quietly. Arthur sighed, sat on the only stool, and placed his hands on the briefcase. Because I owe your mother. And because Jeanette told me your husband is playing a dirty game. He wants a divorce, Clara said, staring into her cup. He wants to take everything. He says I'm sick. I know, Arthur nodded. Robert is an ambitious and very greedy man. But there's one thing he doesn't know. Something I know. He unlatched the briefcase and pulled out a yellowed folder. This is a copy of your mother's will. Not the one everyone saw, but the real one. An addendum to it, which I drafted myself when I was just starting my practice. Clara set the tea on the table. Her hands were shaking again. What addendum? Your mother was a wise woman, Clara. She saw what kind of man your sister was marrying, and she saw what kind of man Robert was. She was afraid they would leave you with nothing. So she arranged it so that the main asset, not money, but the collection and the house, would pass to you only under certain conditions. And Robert cannot meet those conditions. He's been searching for this document for 6 months. He's torn through all the archives, but he couldn't find it, because I have the original. Arthur looked her in the eye. Miss Peterson, you have a choice. You can sign Robert's papers, take the pittance he's offering, and leave. Start over. Forget this as a bad dream. No one would blame you. Fighting the system, fighting a city official, it's dirty, long, and painful. They will drag your name through the mud, haul you through the courts. He paused. Or, you can trust me. We will go to court. We will present this will. We will prove that Robert is lying. But it will be a war. A real war. Are you ready for that? Clara looked down at her hands, at the paint ingrained in her skin, the old scar from a glass cut. All her life she had been mending other people's things, gluing, patching, hiding the cracks. She was used to being quiet, invisible, convenient, as Robert would say. She remembered Aunt Jean, her urgent whisper, "You're kind, like your mother. But you need to know, if she ran now, she wouldn't just be betraying herself, she'd be betraying her mother. She'd be betraying Jean. She'd be betraying the little girl she once was, the one who believed in justice. I don't want a war," she said quietly. Arthur lowered his eyes and began to put the papers back in his briefcase. But I won't give him my mother's memory, Clara finished firmly. Arthur froze. He slowly raised his head. A spark lit up in his eyes, the same one her mother must have seen in him all those years ago. Are you sure? He asked. There will be no turning back. I'm sure. Clara straightened up. Her back ached from the night on the cot, but it didn't matter now. What do we need to do? Arthur smiled. No longer sad, but with a hint of fighting spirit. First, we finish our tea. Then, we go to the old house. We need to find what's hidden behind that tile. Without that, the will is just a piece of paper. We need proof. Clara nodded. The fear hadn't vanished. It sat inside her like a cold lump. But now, next to it, something else had appeared. Anger and resolve. She would no longer be gluing broken teacups. Now, she would be putting her own life back together. Arthur pulled another document from his briefcase, a thick, time-yellowed sheet with an embossed seal. Look, Clara. His finger, trembling slightly with excitement, slid across the lines. This is an extract from the county land registry, dated 15 years ago. The original. Clara leaned over the table. The letters danced before her eyes, but the meaning slowly seeped into her consciousness, like sunlight through thick leaves. Owner. Vera Peterson. She read her mother's name aloud. But Robert said, he showed me documents where he was listed as the owner. He said he transferred everything to his name 5 years ago, when Mom was sick, to simplify the taxes. Arthur gave a sad smile. Robert is a master of showing off impressive paperwork, but legally, the old house downtown, the one you grew up in, never belonged to him. Your mother, Clara, was smarter than he thought. She left a blind spot in the deed. A blind spot? Yes. A tiny legal loophole. A clause written in fine print on the reverse side, which only comes into effect in the event of an attempted sale or a divorce. According to it, the right of ownership can only pass to a direct female heir, that is, to you or your sister, had she not waived her inheritance in exchange for cash. Clara stared at the lawyer, stunned. So, he can't kick me out. He cannot. Moreover, he has no right to even set foot on the property without your permission. This document is your shield, Clara. As long as you have it, Robert is powerless to sell anything. Arthur carefully folded the paper and placed it in Clara's hands. His gaze became warm, almost fatherly. You know, I remember when your mother used to bring me sandwiches at the dorm. I was a broke student back then, hungry and angry at the world, and she would say, Arthur, honesty isn't a weakness. It's an asset that never depreciates. I could never repay her. Consider this my debt. Clara clutched the document. For the first time in the last 24 hours, she felt solid ground beneath her feet. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. The most important part is ahead. We need to find what Jeanette was talking about. If that really is the Verbitsky collection, it changes everything. An hour later, they were standing at the gate of the old house. The garden was overgrown with weeds, the apple trees had gone wild, and the paint on the shutters was peeling, revealing gray wood underneath. Robert had long given up on the place, calling it a teardown. Clara opened the lock with her key, one she had carried on her keyring but hadn't used in years. The door creaked open, letting them into the cool twilight of the entryway. The house smelled of dust and dried herbs. Time seemed to have stopped here. Her father's old coat still hung on the rack. On a shelf stood jars of jam that no one had ever eaten. Clara walked into the kitchen. Her heart was beating loudly and heavily. She approached the enormous brick hearth that took up half the wall. The decorative tiles, once bright white, were now covered in a layer of soot and lime. Third from the bottom, she whispered Aunt Jean's words. The tile with the bluebell. Clara ran her hand over the rough surface. There it was, a faint blue flower, almost worn away by time. She took a small palette knife from her pocket, one she always carried. Her hands moved with familiar confidence. This was her element. Pry gently. Apply pressure. Feel the material resist. Plaster crumbled to the floor in a fine powder. The tile didn't give way at first. Clara bit her lip, working carefully, millimeter by millimeter, so as not to damage the old masonry. Finally, there was a dull click. The tile came loose. Behind it was a dark recess. Arthur shone his phone's flashlight into it. Something gleamed in the depths. Clara, holding her breath, reached her hand into the opening. Her fingers found smooth, cool wood, a small box. She pulled it out into the light. It was an ordinary wooden toolbox, crudely made, but the lid was nailed shut tight. Arthur handed her a screwdriver he found on the windowsill. Clara pried the lid open. The nails screeched as they came out of the dry wood. Inside, nestled in beds of old cotton batting and yellowed newspaper, they lay. 6 porcelain figurines. Clara carefully took out the first one, a shepherdess with a basket. Imperial Meissen Manufactory, early 20th century. Perfect condition. Not a chip, not a crack. The gold leaf shone as if the artist had applied it yesterday. After her came a dancer, a musician, a girl with a yoke, the entire Pastoral Scenes series. My God, Arthur breathed, looking over Clara's shoulder at the treasure. I thought it was a legend. Your mother said the collection was lost during the war. She hid it. Clara's voice trembled, not with fear now, but with reverence. She knew my father might sell them for his debts, or that times would get hard. She held the fragile figurine, feeling its weight, its coolness, its perfection. This wasn't just art. It was her family's history, something that had survived against all odds. In that moment, Clara felt something shift inside her. The fatigue, the fear, the self-doubt, it all retreated before a simple truth. She was a master. She knew the value of things, and she knew her own value. Her mother hadn't left this so Clara could sell it and buy an apartment. She had left it as a sign, a reminder of who they were. Arthur, who had been watching her with respect, reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a business card. "Miss Peterson," he said seriously, "this is the number of an old friend of mine. He's a curator at the Historical Museum in the state capital, a man of unimpeachable integrity." He placed the card in her palm, over the hand clutching the figurine. "Call him right now. Tell him you found the Verbitsky collection. He'll create a preliminary inventory over the phone and register the find as a cultural asset. From that moment on, Robert won't be able to claim you stole them. They will become untouchable." Clara looked at the card, then at Arthur. "You've thought of everything," she said. "I just know who we're dealing with," the lawyer replied. "Robert will try to accuse you of stealing family property, but if the collection is registered with a museum, he'll break his teeth on it." Clara nodded. She took out her old phone and dialed the number. The rings were long, drawn out. "Hello," a man's voice answered. "Hello," Clara said firmly. "My name is Clara Peterson. I'd like to report a find." She stood in the middle of the old kitchen, amid the dust and cobwebs, with the phone to her ear and a porcelain shepherdess in her hand. And for the first time in years, she felt like the mistress of this house, the mistress of her own destiny. The next day, Clara walked into the notary's office, not as a petitioner, but as an equal. Arthur walked beside her, carrying his briefcase of documents like a banner. They filed a countersuit, not just an objection, but a demand to recognize her exclusive rights to the Peterson legacy. Gossip spreads faster than wind in Stone Creek. By lunch, the whole town was buzzing. Clara found a treasure. Antique porcelain, worth millions. When she left the office, she was met by her neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who just yesterday had turned away when she saw her. "Clara, dear," she cooed, holding out a jar of raspberry jam. "I brought you a little something. Forgive me for not stopping by. I thought you were busy. Such wonderful news. Your mother, God rest her soul, knew who to leave her treasures to." Clara took the jar, feeling a strange mix of bitterness and amusement. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," she said. "But it's not a treasure. It's a memory." People came up to her, shook her hand, looked into her eyes with a new deference. The same people who had called her the crazy lady with the broken china. Now, to them, she was a heroine, an almost mythical figure. "The Cinderella from the basement," they whispered. Robert appeared towards evening. He cornered her at the entrance to her workshop. He looked terrible. His perfect gray suit was wrinkled. His tie was askew. There were dark shadows under his eyes. All his polished confidence had evaporated like morning mist. "Clara." He stepped toward her, blocking her path. "We need to talk." "Without the lawyers, we have nothing to talk about, Robert," she answered calmly, taking out her keys. "The lawyers will handle everything. Don't be a fool." He grabbed her by the elbow, but immediately let go when he saw her tense up. "Listen, I was rash. With the divorce, the clinic, it was stress. You understand? Work, debts. I just wanted what was best." He tried to smile, his signature, charming smile, the one that used to make her heart melt. But now, Clara saw only the snarl of a cornered animal. "Let's start over," he whispered, moving closer. "We're family. 20 years, Clara. Are you really going to throw it all away over some little statues? We can sell them. Half for you, half for me. We'll buy that house by the ocean you dreamed of. We'll get out of here, live a proper life." Clara looked at him and didn't recognize him. Where was the powerful, strong man she had been afraid of losing? Before her stood a pathetic, frightened man, willing to bargain for his own skin. "A house by the ocean?" she asked quietly. "You never wanted a house by the ocean, Robert. You wanted a condo in the capital and a seat on the city council." "Clara, please." "Go away," she said. Or I'll call the police and tell them how you tried to have me declared insane to get your hands on something that doesn't belong to you." Robert recoiled. Pure, undisguised hatred flashed in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You think you've won? This is just the beginning." He turned and walked away quickly, almost running. His shoulders slumped, hiding his face in his coat collar. Clara was left alone. Evening was falling on the town, lighting the street lamps. She walked to the window of a closed shop and looked at her reflection in the dark glass. A tired face, a stray lock of hair, an old coat. But her eyes were different. There was no fear in them anymore. She remembered how for years she had tolerated Robert's dismissiveness, how she had stayed silent when he mocked her work, how she had agreed to everything just to keep the peace at home. "I was a coward," she told her reflection. "I called it kindness, patience, a woman's wisdom, but it was just cowardice. I was afraid of being alone, afraid of becoming like Aunt Jean, the town crazy everyone laughed at." The thought was bitter as wormwood, but it was the truth. She had let Robert and Liz walk all over her because she didn't believe she deserved better. She herself had given them power over her, but now everything had changed. The porcelain she had found wasn't just money. It was a symbol that she, Clara, was worth something. That she had roots, a history, a talent. She ran her hand over the cold glass, as if wiping away the old image. "Never again," she whispered. "I will never again let anyone else decide for me." The next morning, Arthur called her before she had even opened her eyes. "Miss Peterson," his voice rang with joy. "I have news." The judge issued a preliminary injunction. Clara sat up in bed, clutching the phone. "What does that mean?" "It means a victory, Clara. A small but important one. The court has placed a freeze on any transactions involving your property until the case is resolved. The divorce is on hold. And most importantly, the court has recognized that the old house and everything in it is your exclusive property based on your mother's deed of gift. Robert doesn't even have the right to get near it." Clara exhaled, feeling a huge weight fall from her shoulders. "So, he can't take them?" "No. The collection is yours. Officially. We've won the first round." She hung up and smiled. The sun was shining outside, flooding the room with bright, clear light. It seemed as if nature itself was celebrating her freedom. Clara got up, went to the window, and threw it open. The fresh autumn air rushed in, smelling of leaves and smoke. She had won. She was free. But somewhere deep inside, where the restorer's intuition lived, accustomed to seeing hidden cracks, a sense of unease stirred. Robert wouldn't give up this easily. She had seen his eyes yesterday. It wasn't just fear in them, it was malice. But for now, she didn't want to think about it. For now, she just wanted to breathe. But the happiness proved to be as fragile as an antique saucer. By noon, heavy gray clouds had gathered over Stone Creek, and the first drops of rain hit the window pane, as if warning of trouble. It all started with a phone call, not from Arthur, but from the IRS. A dry female voice informed Clara that her workshop had been seized. Seized? For what? Clara nearly dropped the phone. "I've paid all my taxes," I checked. "We have a document," the woman cut her off. "A promissory note for a huge sum, certified with your signature, and a complaint from the city archives about the theft of municipal property." Clara rushed to the workshop. The basement door was sealed with red and white tape, and a crude wax seal hung on the lock. 2 police officers stood nearby, not even looking in her direction. When she tried to explain it was a mistake, one of them just grunted, "Ma'am, step back," and nudged her away with his shoulder. "This is an active investigation." Robert hadn't wasted any time. He had used every lever, every string of his power to crush her. By evening, the town was buzzing again. But now, the rumors were different. Turns out Clara is a thief, stole museum valuables, and she's drowning in debt. Poor Robert is left to pay for it all. The same neighbors who had brought her jam that morning now hurried to the other side of the street, avoiding her eyes. The fear of Robert's power was stronger than their admiration for her small victory. No one wanted to cross a man from City Hall. Clara sat on a wet park bench, oblivious to the rain. Drops ran down her face, mixing with the tears she no longer bothered to wipe away. In her coat pocket, she clutched a small velvet box, the only thing she had managed to grab from the house. Inside was her mother's silver thimble and a dried sprig of jasmine. "Clara!" She looked up. Liz was walking quickly toward the bench. She didn't have an umbrella. Her perfect hairstyle was soaked, hanging in pathetic strands. "Liz?" A faint hope flickered in Clara's voice. "Did you come to help?" Liz stopped, breathing hard. There was fear in her eyes, but not for Clara. "You have to stop this," she yelled, grabbing her sister's sleeve. "Right now! Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Robert is furious. He could lose his job over this scandal." "He's lying, Liz," Clara said, pulling her arm away. "He forged the documents. He's accusing me of theft, and maybe he's right to." Liz's face twisted. "You're not well, Clara. You're just like her. Who's going to believe you? An unemployed restorer over a respected public figure. I'm your sister." "You're selfish!" Liz cut her off, her voice cracking into a shriek. "You only think about your broken pottery. Did you think about me?" "Robert promised to help us with our mortgage if this all went away quietly. And now he's threatening to fire my husband." "Stop it, Clara. Admit you're sick. Sign the papers, and he'll make it all go away. Please." Clara looked at her sister and saw a stranger, a pathetic creature crushed by fear and greed. "Go away," she said quietly, but so firmly that Liz recoiled. "Go away. Liz, I don't have a sister anymore." Liz sobbed, covered her face with her hands, and ran off down the wet path, leaving Clara alone in the rain. Arthur arrived soon after. He looked 10 years older. "Miss Peterson," he said, sitting beside her on the wet bench without even trying to open his umbrella. "Things are bad." "What did he do?" "He found a doctor, the same psychiatrist who treated Jeanette. The doctor is prepared to testify that you have schizophrenia, that your obsession with old things is a symptom, and that you cannot be held responsible for your actions." "But that's a lie!" Clara jumped up. "I'm perfectly healthy. I'll take any evaluation. Robert provided the court with your journals." Arthur looked down. "I've seen copies. There are strange entries in them. About things talking to you. About hearing voices." "Those are my work notebooks," Clara cried. "I write down the histories of the pieces I restore. The teacup told me a story about a ball. It's a metaphor." "The judge doesn't understand metaphors, Clara, especially when he's being told from above how he should understand them. And the promissory note, forensics confirmed the signature is yours." "I never signed anything." "I know. But the quality of the forgery. Robert has been preparing for this for years. He practiced your handwriting. He created a perfect trap." Arthur clenched his fists. "I will file an appeal. I'll take this to the Supreme Court. But right now they can come for you. The order for an involuntary psychiatric evaluation has already been signed." Clara felt the ground give way. The walls of her world were closing in, crushing her. She was alone. Against the system. Against the money. Against her own family. "Do I need to hide?" she asked. "No." The lawyer shook his head. "If you run, it will be proof of your guilt and your illness. We have to face them head on. But I'm afraid, Clara. I'm afraid I can't protect you right now." They went to her temporary shelter, a small room in a boarding house that Arthur had helped her rent yesterday. It was cold and smelled of other people's misery. Clara sat on the bed, clutching her mother's thimble. It felt warm, alive. "Mom," she whispered to herself. "Mom, help me. I don't know what to do. I'm not crazy. I just wanted to protect our memory." There was a loud, authoritative knock on the door. Clara and Arthur looked at each other. The lawyer's eyes were filled with pain and helplessness. "Open up, police." Clara slowly stood. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. She walked to the door and turned the lock. On the threshold stood 2 police officers and a woman in a white coat. Behind them, Robert loomed. He didn't come inside, just stood in the hall with his arms crossed. A triumphant, cruel smile played on his lips. "Clara Peterson?" the officer asked, taking out handcuffs. "You'll have to come with us. We have a court order for your involuntary commitment for psychiatric evaluation." "I'm not sick," Clara said, looking her husband straight in the eye. "The doctors will decide that," Robert smirked. "Don't resist, darling. It's for your own good." The woman in the white coat stepped forward, taking Clara by the arm. Her grip was professional, firm. "Let's go, dear," she said in a sickly sweet voice. "No need for a scene. We'll give you a little shot, and you'll calm down." Clara didn't resist. She walked down the hallway, feeling the stares of the neighbors, full of fear and disgust. Robert had won. He had taken everything from her. Her home, her name, her freedom. But as they led her outside to the ambulance, she suddenly saw a familiar face in the crowd of onlookers. It wasn't Aunt Jean, and it wasn't Liz. It was Laura, Robert's secretary. The gray mouse no one ever noticed. She was standing by a lamppost, clutching a small green notebook to her chest, and she was looking at Clara with such desperation and resolve that it took Clara's breath away. The doors of the ambulance slammed shut, cutting Clara off from the world. But in the darkness of the vehicle, she could still see that look. The look of someone who had made a decision. The corridor of the psychiatric clinic was cold. Clara sat on a hard metal bench, arms wrapped around her shoulders, listening to someone screaming monotonously far behind a locked door. They had told her to wait for the doctor on duty. "The paperwork will take a while," a nurse had grumbled, taking her ID before disappearing for a coffee break. Clara closed her eyes. She wasn't crying. There was no energy left for tears. Inside was only a hollow emptiness, like a shattered vase that could never be glued back together. At the far end of the hall, the front door slammed. The sound of heels clicked across the floor, fast and nervous. Clara didn't look up. She didn't care who else they had brought in, another crazy person betrayed by their loved ones. The footsteps stopped right in front of her. "Miss Peterson?" The voice was quiet, trembling. Clara opened her eyes. Standing before her was Laura, Robert's secretary, the same gray mouse who had brought him coffee for years and silently endured his yelling. Right now, she looked terrified. A pale face, disheveled hair, her coat buttoned wrong. "Laura?" Clara was surprised, but her voice came out flat. "What are you doing here? Did Robert send you to make sure I didn't escape?" Laura took a sharp breath and glanced toward the nurse's station. It was empty. "No," she whispered, sitting on the very edge of the bench. "He doesn't know I'm here. If he finds out, he'll kill me." Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely open her purse. "Take this," she said, shoving a small green notebook with a worn cover into Clara's hands. "Quick, hide it." Clara took the notebook automatically. "What is this?" "It's his ledger. The real one, not the one he shows the auditors." Laura spoke quickly, tumbling over her words as if afraid she'd be cut off. "I saw him do it, Miss Peterson. He would sit in his office at night, practicing your mother's signature. And yours, too. He filled hundreds of pages until he got it perfect. I found the drafts in his wastebasket." Clara felt the coldness in her chest turn to a burning heat. "You knew?" she asked. "You knew he framed me with the debt? That he was stealing from the city budget?" "I suspected." Laura dropped her eyes, fidgeting with her purse strap. "But I was scared. He's a powerful man. And who am I? I have 2 kids. A mortgage. He said if I made a peep, I'd be blacklisted. That he'd have me put in jail as an accomplice." She sniffled. "But yesterday, when he was celebrating that they'd taken you away, he said to someone on the phone, 'The old lady is dealt with. Now we can sell the apartment and put the girl in a group home.' He was talking about my mother, about how a man like him cheated her out of her apartment 10 years ago. I was just a kid. I didn't understand. My mom died penniless in a nursing home because someone just like Robert took everything from her." Laura looked up at Clara, her eyes full of tears and rage. "I can't let him do it again. Not to you. You're a kind person, Miss Peterson. You always gave me a chocolate bar for my birthday, even though I'm nobody to you. And him? He's a monster." Clara opened the notebook. The pages were filled with Robert's small, neat handwriting. Dates, sums, names, bribe for construction tender, kickback on development project, transfer to offshore account, and most damning of all, a detailed plan for how to strip Clara of her inheritance, with notes: forge promissory note, bribe doctor, pressure sister. This wasn't just proof of her innocence. This was a bomb that could destroy Robert completely. "It's all in there," Laura whispered. "Account numbers, names of shell corporations, even the receipts from the doctor who wrote your diagnosis. He paid him in cash." Clara closed the notebook and hid it in the inside pocket of her coat, close to her heart. Thank you, she said. Laura, do you realize what you've done? You've saved my life. I've saved my soul, Laura replied, standing up. You have to run, Miss Peterson. You don't have much time. The guardianship hearing at the notary's office is set for today at 5 o'clock. He wants to have it finalized while you're in here. 5 o'clock. Clara glanced at the wall clock. It was 3:30. Yes, he's sure you won't show up, that you'll be locked in a room. Clara grabbed Laura's hand. How do I get out of here? They took my ID. I'll distract the nurse, Laura said, a surprising firmness in her voice. I'll say I'm dropping off paperwork from his office. You go to the service exit. It's unlocked. I checked. And you? I'll be fine. Just get to the notary and destroy him. Laura turned and walked toward the nurse's station, adjusting her hair and adopting the air of a professional secretary. Clara didn't wait. She slipped down a side corridor, toward a dim light bulb above a door marked exit. Her heart was pounding like a drum. The door gave way. Cool! Fresh air hit her face. Freedom! She ran out into the rain and rushed to the nearest payphone on the corner. Her fingers fumbled for change in her pocket. A dial tone. Another. Hello? Arthur's voice was hoarse, exhausted. Arthur, it's me! She cried into the receiver. I escaped. Clara, where are you? I'm on my way. No time. Meet me at the notary's office at 5. 5 o'clock sharp. The notary? Clara, you don't understand. Robert will be there, the police. If you show up without any legal standing, they'll arrest you on the spot. Let them try, Clara said, and her voice rang with steel. I have something better than legal standing. I have his death in a green binding. What? What are you talking about? Laura, his secretary. She gave me his black ledger. The original, Arthur. It has everything. The bribes, the forgeries, the accounts. Proof, he paid off the doctor and the judge. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Arthur let out a long, relieved breath. My God, Clara. Do you realize what this means? It's the end. For him. I know, but we have to be on time. He wants to finalize the guardianship today. I'll be there in 20 minutes with the district attorney. I have a friend, an honest man. He's been investigating City Hall for a long time, but he never had the evidence. Now he does. Wait for me at the entrance. Clara hung up. The rain intensified, turning into a downpour, but she didn't feel the cold. A fire was burning inside her. She looked at her watch. 4:45. She would make it. She had to make it. For her mom, for Aunt Jean, for Laura, and for herself, for the Clara they had tried to break, who had turned out to be stronger than any porcelain. She straightened the collar of her coat, clutched the green notebook in her pocket, and stepped out into the rain to meet her fate. The notary's reception area smelled of expensive wood polish and old paper. Robert sat in a leather armchair, one leg crossed over the other, lazily looking through documents. Perched on the edge of a chair beside him was Liz. She was nervously twisting the strap of her purse, glancing at the clock every few seconds. Relax, Liz, Robert said without looking up from the papers. Everything is under control. In 10 minutes, Clara will be officially declared incompetent. I'll become her legal guardian, and we can finally deal with this inheritance. What if she shows up? Her sister asked in a trembling voice. Robert smirked. She's not coming. She's in a padded room right now, heavily medicated. I made sure of it. The door swung open. On the threshold stood Clara. Robert froze, his hand halfway to his tie. Liz gasped and pressed a hand to her mouth. This wasn't the Clara they knew, the beaten-down woman in an old sweater with perpetually slumped shoulders. This woman was wearing a tailored moss-green suit that brought out the color of her eyes. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, revealing the line of her neck, but the most important thing was her gaze direct, calm, and hard as stone. Behind her stood Arthur and a tall man in the uniform of a prosecutor, Clara. Robert jumped up, knocking over his chair. How did you? You escaped. That's a felony. Someone call the police. The police are already here, Robert, Clara answered calmly. She walked to the notary's desk, ignoring her husband, and placed the small green notebook in front of the elderly man in glasses. What is this? The notary asked, adjusting his spectacles. This, Clara said, looking Robert straight in the eye, is proof that my husband is a thief and a fraud. It's all in here. The accounts, the bribes, the forged signatures, and the money he stole from this city and from my family." Robert's face turned a pasty gray. He lunged for the notebook, but the prosecutor intercepted his arm. "I wouldn't do that, sir," he said coldly. "This is now evidence." Robert stumbled back, breathing heavily. He shot a crazed look from Clara to the prosecutor, to his sister, who was shrinking into her chair, trying to become invisible. "It's a fake!" he yelled. "She's insane! I have a doctor's report." "The only insane thing about me, Robert," Clara said softly, "was that I ever believed you were a man of honor." She turned to the notary. "I demand that all powers of attorney issued in this man's name be revoked. I am filing charges for the theft of my property and attempted false imprisonment." A heavy silence fell over the office, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock. Robert collapsed back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. He knew it was over. His perfect plan, his career, his life, it had all come crashing down like a house of cards. 5 minutes later, 2 police officers entered the room. Robert didn't resist. He walked out, slumped over, staring at the floor, looking as if he had aged 20 years in a single moment. Liz remained sitting in the hallway. As Clara passed, her sister looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Clara," she whispered, "forgive me. I didn't know." Clara stopped. She looked at her sister, the woman with whom she had shared a childhood, toys, secrets, and realized she no longer felt anger, only pity and a vast, bottomless exhaustion. "You knew, Liz," she said gently. "You knew everything. It was just more convenient for you not to see it." She didn't wait for a reply. She walked out of the building onto the street, where the rain had finally stopped, and the evening sun was breaking through the clouds. 6 months passed. Spring came early that year, and it was warm. The garden around the small house on the edge of town was bursting with blossoms. The apple trees, which Clara had so carefully tended, were finally blooming in fragrant white clouds. Clara sat on the porch, her face turned to the sun. In her hands was a cup of hot mint tea. She had pieced this cup together herself, from the very shards she'd found in the attic when she moved in. A thin gold line of kintsugi ran along the crack, making it even more beautiful. A reminder that what is broken can be mended. From the open window of the house, she could hear the radio playing. In there, in her new workshop, it smelled of beeswax, fresh paint, and lavender. On a shelf, in a place of honor, stood 5 porcelain figurines. The 6th, the shepherdess, had to be sold to buy this house and pay for Aunt Jean's medical care. Aunt Jean lived with her now. She still sometimes talked to ghosts, but her conversations were peaceful these days. She would sit in a rocking chair in the garden, sorting through old photographs and smiling at her own thoughts. Robert received a prison sentence. 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. They said he worked in the prison library and wrote letters of appeal to anyone who would listen. Liz left town. She couldn't bear the sideways glances from the neighbors and moved to live with her daughter in another state. Clara didn't call her, and Liz didn't call either. That wound hadn't healed yet, and maybe it never would. Clara took a sip of tea. It was sweet and sharp at the same time. She was alone, but for the first time in many years, she didn't feel lonely. She had work that she loved. She had a home where no one held her success against her. She had the memory of her mother, which now brought warmth, not pain. And she had Laura. The former secretary now worked as her assistant, handling the books and learning to restore old bindings. It turned out she had a gift for it. Clara set her cup on the railing and looked at her own palms. They were still stained with glue and paint, but now they were the hands of a free woman, the hands of a master who knew the value of things and of people. The sun slowly set, painting the sky in soft shades of pink. Clara took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of spring and a new life. She had made it. She had survived. And maybe, someday, she would learn to trust again, but that would be another story entirely. And so concludes the story of Clara, a story of how a seemingly fragile woman proved to be stronger than circumstance, betrayal, and her own self-doubt. What do you think? Was Clara right not to forgive her sister? After all, they say blood is thicker than water. Or is a betrayal by a loved one unforgivable because it destroys a part of ourselves? I'm very interested in your opinion. And one more question. Was it worth selling a piece of the collection to start a new life? Or is the memory of the past more important than the future? Let me know what you think in the comments. Maybe you've faced a similar choice yourself. Dear listeners who have accompanied me until the end of my story, how did you find today's tale? I'm curious about the impression it has left in your hearts and the thoughts it has sparked in you. Please feel free to share your impressions and opinions in the comments. I will carefully read each of them. The likes and subscriptions you give me are the greatest source of strength and motivation for creating better stories in the future. Please don't forget to do so. I sincerely wish that your life is always filled with happiness and good fortune, and that the warm light in your hearts never fades.